And they'll keep telling you that's going to happen until they go out of business. The day before they went out of business, everything is about to turn up and to the right. The reason that happens is that for every story of the entrepreneur who just barely pulled up, there are 10 or 100 of entrepreneurs that persevered the plane straight into the ground. The issue is you don't hear those stories. Those don't make the magazines. Those aren't very exciting. So the problem is we have this idea that somehow pouring more energy and effort into entrepreneurial ventures is a good idea. But if you look at the stats, and this is just one of millions of demonstrations we could use, yeah? I'm just going to take questions, so yeah, go for it.
So is that the Gmail logo I can see in the bottom right? And I think Facebook in the bottom center?
Yes, yes.
And they're both unringed?
Yes, that's right. They're still alive.
So how would you categorize them in what you've just said?
Well, here's the thing. The question we're asking when we talk about success in entrepreneurship is the wrong question. That's why we can't even make sense of this, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. The Facebook logo, I think you're right, it's here, is kind of the same as, I guess I shouldn't pick on any other in particular, but just pick another one at random. They're the same size, they're both still alive, so they're equally successful ventures? Maybe? No. And you want to say that one of the green circles who's been acquired, that's more successful than Facebook and Gmail? I don't think so. Because we're asking the wrong question. The question is not, did anybody make money? The question is, how many of these ventures actually lived up to the raw amount of time, talent, passion, creativity, and determination that was poured into them by their founders and employees? Right? How many of them is the universe a better place because we did this venture than it would have been if we hadn't? Right? Is the benefit higher than the opportunity cost of having done it? And by that higher standard, I think very few of these companies can be, we claim as a success. And what bothers me personally is not that entrepreneurship is a risky business, so of course there's going to be companies that fail. That's nothing wrong with that. Everyone knows when you're doing innovation and invention, you're supposed to increase your failure rate, right, to make sure you're taking big enough risks. But these companies are not failing because the risks they took were too big. They're failing because nobody wanted the product that they wound up building. And you say, is that really not a preventable condition? Or was there no way we couldn't have known 3 years ago that some of these companies were doomed to failure from the beginning? I think the answer is yes. And of course, I know that in a kind of visceral way because most of the startups that I personally have built have failed. And I'm like, that's a great way to start as a talking head. Hi everybody, most of my companies have failed and most of you will fail too. So, but we got an hour left, so what else do you want to talk about? But that's the reality of entrepreneurship. And what's interesting about the failures that I've had is they were all of that form, of companies that weren't failing because the technology didn't work, they failed because there were not customers to buy the technology when the time came. And the other thing that's interesting about the companies that I've done is every single time, I was 100% sure I knew how to run a startup. I always was convinced I knew what to do, and I had learned my lessons and I was going to be successful, and of course most of the time I was wrong. I also right now think I know how to build a startup, but you'll have to judge for yourself whether it makes sense. So we have this epidemic of failure and what I consider to be a waste of people's time happening throughout our industry, and naturally we want to blame somebody. I certainly do because all my companies failed, but that can't be my fault. So I've got to have somebody to blame. I'm sure many of you would like someone too. So I brought a candidate for blame. It's this guy. This is Frederick Winslow Taylor, the father of something called scientific management. He died in the early part of the 20th century. So it might seem a little strange to be blaming problems in our very high-tech industry on a man who died before the invention of the digital computer, but bear with me. Taylor was the first person really to take a systematic approach to studying how work was done. And he had the insight, which today I think we consider obvious, but at the time was radical, that we should study work using science so that we could make it more efficient. I mean, the idea that work should be done efficiently was a new idea. And we can't conceive of that now. In fact, one of the things that's strange about Taylor, and it's kind of funny, we're going to blame him for our problems, because we also should be blaming him for the incredible material prosperity that we enjoy today. That insight that work should be studied scientifically is at the heart of the managerial revolution of the 20th century that made it possible for all of us to wear these clothes and eat the food I'm sure we ate and be in a building like this. We think of the 20th century as a technological revolution century, and there are plenty of technologies that were invented there, but really the big deal is our ability to manage work in a different way. And so, if any of you have heard of Frederick Winslow Taylor, you probably will have heard about his relatively discredited ideas like time and motion studies, or the idea that workers should be treated like automata. That's what we know him for now, because his true insights are so obvious to us that we can't conceive of them having been invented. that's actually too hard for us to fathom. Like the idea that work should be divided into tasks. I mean, what could be more obvious than that? That you should pay people a bonus based on whether they do the task or not. In Taylor's day, when someone would actually fulfill their quota and like earn the bonus, the idea was that you'd set the bonus too low and you would immediately raise it. So it'd make it harder to get the bonus next time, right? Think for like 3 seconds about what the managerial impact of that kind of management philosophy is. People were like not exactly incentivized to do their best work. And the most important one is that there should be somebody called a manager who should study how work is done and apportion it amongst workers who are instructed in the best way to do their job. In 1899, if you were to say, we should have a manager tell a master craftsman how to do their job, people would have laughed in your face. That's like the dumbest thing you could say, because a master craftsman has apprenticed themselves for years, maybe decades, to learn that craft. How could a manager know better than them what they should do? So the best thing you could do is just tell them what you want to have accomplished, delegate it to them, and kind of hope for the best. But hoping for the best is not a system-wide approach to management and efficiency. It's actually wildly inefficient. Did it sound anything familiar about that negotiation to you between managers and master craftsmen? The way we manage knowledge work today, not just technology, not just entrepreneurship, not just software development, all knowledge work is circa 1899 master craftsman thinking. And it is on its way out. Because the same insight that Taylor had about what we now call blue-collar work, manual labor, will apply also to knowledge work. We'll get there. But I want to talk first about the problem, because why is it that this idea, which was so beneficial to the 20th century, that allowed for the invention of the assembly line, the automobile, and eventually the digital computer, could be causing us so much harm now? The issue is that this idea, was originally called scientific management, and it became a management paradigm that was further refined, and guys like Alfred Sloan built it out, into cost accounting and operations and the full MBA curriculum. And it was kind of handed down generation to generation, and by the time it got handed down to me, it looked like this. When I was trained as a software developer, I was taught this thing. This is the waterfall development methodology. I was taught this as the manufacturing metaphor of software development. Incidentally, you can imagine how pissed off I was when I found out that they don't use this in manufacturing anymore. It's not clear to me why we even use it as a metaphor. What's so good about it? But I mean, this is Taylor taken to the nth degree. The idea that people should be functional specialists and learn to do one thing extremely well, and that we should have departments of them led by what Taylor called functional foremen, but what we would call managers, is straight from 1911. And it looks like this. We have some people who specialize in collecting requirements, some people who specialize in building specification documents, and we have designers, implementers, some kind of QA, and they hand it off to maintenance. And work proceeds kind of linearly through the stages. When we do that, our unit of progress for work is that we are advancing to the next stage. So I went to the startup that spent something like $50 million in 5 years in stealth R&D before we launched our product. I think we had 200 employees before customers ever saw our product. Those of you who've been around the business should already be able to understand what happened next. Suffice to say, it didn't turn out that well. And it's actually kind of a painful experience, because you spend 5 years of your life on something, you really hope you have something to show for it at the end, and we didn't. But here's the thing that's really frustrating about doing work in the waterfall method. It's not that we failed to achieve the plan that we had set out for ourselves. It's not that we didn't do this well, it's just that we had a bad plan to begin with. So we did what I call achieving failure, where the whole time you're doing it, you feel like you're making progress. In fact, you're getting constant positive reinforcement that you're constantly advancing to the next stage. And in fact, in most large companies, you can actually be promoted for learning to do your little box really well, regardless of whether your box contributes to the company's success in any way whatsoever. I mean, like in design, you can win awards for designing products that are never built. Hello? Right? And that's true in engineering. It's true all through the stack. In fact, you can be promoted. You can be showing functional excellence even as your company is going down the tubes. We're having that problem in kind of industry after industry. So what's frustrating about this is that this is a methodology that works when, I don't know if you can see this, when the problem is well known and the solution is well known. See, the question that we deal with, this question of not can it be built, but should it be built, is a question Fred Taylor would have boggled his mind. Because in 1911, there was no question about what should be built. It was an urgent, dire need to feed, clothe, and house people. And all of the efforts of management were in driving the costs of production down